So let's kind of dive in here a little bit. And as you, if you are like me, you read ahead, right? You didn't wait for me to start preaching on Habakkuk 2. You already read ahead. And you're like, Mike, this is an easy book. It's only 3 chapters long. I read the whole thing already. And so that's great. But what I want you to do is in some of this, and this really here, I think for some of us, this book relates to us, but we kind of miss some of it, right? You know, like sometimes we hit a wall in our faith is kind of what this kind of starts as. Some of us were doubting. We have some things that are going on. Some of us were having a crisis of belief. These are all things that kind of go along with this. And we know and we believe that God can do something, but he doesn't do something. And as I was talking to some of you as you were leaving, you're like, many of you would share that last week is a tough message. It's rough. As you go through it, you just go, God can do something, and you hear him crying out and lamenting the Habakkuk in this story, but why isn't God doing something? What happened? And so it makes it to where it's tough. And I told you last week we weren't going to sew it up in 30 minutes. It wasn't a sitcom sermon, and today is the same thing. You're not gonna walk out of here at the end of this going, wow, he put that into a nice bow. It was great. He delivered us a great package. We're going to have some unanswered questions at the end of this week, just as if you were reading Habakkuk 2, there's some unanswered questions that are there, right? So, and I just want to give you a heads up, if you didn't like last week, you're really not going to like this one. And so, welcome to the edge. Here to make you feel good about yourself. Anyway, a little bit of review. Habakkuk is a minor prophet. Minor prophet, major prophet, really difference. One wrote a lot, one wrote a little. Not that it's unimportant, that it's less important, not any of those things. Well, hopefully you brought your app with you because you might need that for what we're about to talk about. But a minor prophet, really simple. Minor prophet writes less things. Major prophet writes more. And they really are these champions. And so Habakkuk is about 600 years before Christ. And he's writing to God here. He's like the nation of Judah is suffering, and he's writing to God. And Habakkuk complains to God. And here's what God says. God says, I'm getting ready to amaze you. But before I do that, I'm going to rise up the Babylonians, and they're going to take over your community. And so you're calling out for help. You're crying, going, God, please help us. Please come. This is where some of us go, right? Some of us go, God, please help. I need help with my finances. And God goes, well, first, before I do that, let me just throw you another bill. One of these ones that you just weren't anticipating. God, I'm struggling with this. Well, I'm struggling with my health. Well, let me throw another health thing on top of it. It's just one of these things. God just goes, let me throw another thing on top of it because I'm really trying to get you to depend upon me before you just kind of dive in and chase after these other things. So chapter 1, I think that we'll just describe that as wondering. Wondering what God is doing. God, what are you doing? So we're going to call that wandering and wondering. But here's the thing. The key to that is don't walk away in this period. Don't walk away from God in chapter 1. See, that's what ends up happening. Is something happens like this. God, why is this going on? God, why is this happening? And what ends up happening is people walk away. And this is what we see a lot of times with people in their faith now. What happens is they come, they know who Jesus is, they start this relationship, and then something comes up. And they go, God, why did you allow this to happen? And then they walk away. If you're real, why is this going on? Why? And see, the thing is that what ends up happening is there's this parable where seed is scattered. That seed was scattered in hard soil, we'll call it, because you weren't able to take root. You weren't able to grow. You weren't able to get from there. And so as you're in this period, you're wondering, God, what are you doing? What's going on here? In chapter 2, the overemphasis of this is waiting. You're going to be waiting. That's the overemphasis here. And see, the problem is, most of us in here, we don't like waiting. We don't like waiting at all, to be honest with you. Here, I'll give you an example. So I'm 46. Some of you are close to my age. Some of you are younger. Some of you are older, right? But here's the thing. Any of you that experienced the internet 25 years ago or 20 years ago when it was first making its first thing, right? Anybody ever get emailed a picture? Did you get an email? Did you get a picture emailed to you? Like just say 1996 email, and it was like one photo, right? And you clicked on that thing, and it would say downloading, and you would start seeing little pixels come across the screen, right? And you would get up and you would walk away from the computer. You'd be like, I don't know. And then somebody would be a wise guy and pick up the phone in the house. Hello? And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. And you got disconnected. And you'd have to start all over again, right? You had that dial-up garbage internet. We call it garbage, but it was amazing back then. You were paying good money for it back then. You were paying $30 for it back then, complaining about what you're paying $30 for now, by the way. And so here's the thing, it would kind of, and then you would start all over, and it would take forever. You never complained about it at that point. You were like, it is what it is. You're like, it just happens. But if that happened today, whoo, do you know that you would be on the phone so fast with AT&T, Comcast, whoever your provider is? You'd be like, I don't know what's wrong with this, but you need to fix it now. Like you would be there like, you have to take care of this. Well, what's going on? Well, it's literally 1998 internet here. Come fix this. It's downloading at 56K. You would go, we have to fix this. It won't load. And see, here's the thing. You don't like waiting. If Netflix, anytime it buffers, anytime something like that, if you're watching TV, what do? I got to complain. We got to figure this out. There's no way I'm going to. See, that's where we're at in this world. We want it, and we want it now. I will not wait. I want it now. Even in your life, just think about this. When you buy something from Amazon and it says that you're going to wait a week, what do? You find a different item. You're like, well, that one's the one I wanted, but that one shows up tomorrow. Let's try this one first. And then when it shows up, you're like, that's the wrong thing. And then you have to return it and send it back, and all of a sudden it takes longer, but you will change what you were going to purchase in order to be able to have it now, to have it today. And see, that's the problem. If you go to Instagram and Instagram doesn't load, what do? You're like, what's wrong with this? I don't want to wait. See, wandering is no fun. I hate going shopping sometimes with my wife when she doesn't have a plan, right? Where are we going? Well, we're just going to go check out the mall. No, we're not. You're going to go check out the mall. I'm going to go this place. I don't want to wander. But here's the other thing. I don't want to wait either. So wandering is no fun. Waiting is worse. That's just how it is. I don't want to wait. So in Habakkuk, the overall is don't walk away in 1, don't quit in 2. Just giving you the heads up right at the beginning. So today, 3 things to do when you're hurting. So as you open this up and as you start to look at this, so 3 things to do as you're hurting. Because remember, this series, as we're talking about this is the silence. And so as you're waiting and you're hurting and you're going, God, where is it that you're at? What's going on here? And so it's just 3 things that you're going to do. Because most of us, when we're crying out like Habakkuk is, we're hurting. So as we're hurting, number 1, listen. So this is how it opens up. And so Habakkuk 2:1, I will stand at my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what God will say to me. I'm listening. I'm looking to see. I'm waiting for what God is going to. See, he doesn't run. He doesn't quit. He doesn't give up. And see, this is not easy. He's hurting. He's struggling. And most of us, when we're at that point, we don't want to listen. Have you ever had your kids run up to you and they're in utter tears and you're trying to get them to just tell you what happened? You're just trying to get, and see, when we're hurting, it's so difficult. You're just out of, and this is the case. Just imagine he is crying out, tears running down his face. He is struggling. It's hard to even share, but you definitely don't want to listen. You don't want to listen. And he's telling God what he should be doing. You should be saving people's marriages. You should be helping people get through this health obstacle. You should be going through this. You should be helping people here. This is where he's crying out. God, you can do these things. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you saving this? Why aren't you helping people get through this? Why aren't you ending wars? Why aren't you going through and taking care of this? This is where he's crying out. And I think a lot of us are in this, and so as we're crying out, when you're doing that, it's very hard to listen to what God is trying to tell you. God's trying to share something with you, and you're too busy yelling at him for what he's not doing, and he's trying to go, well, hey, look, I'm trying to share something with you. You need to listen. You need to listen to me. Listen, I'm trying to share something with you. And the problem is, too often, we're already moved on from what God is trying to tell us. See, What the problem is, sometimes, and especially as you start seeing this, you applied for a school, you applied for a job, you didn't get accepted, you didn't get hired at that job, and you blame God for it. But God's going, well, wait a minute, I'm trying to get you into a better school and trying to get you a better job, but you're too busy complaining about what I didn't do back here. I'm trying to do something more that will amaze you. He's already said, I'm doing something that will amaze you, but I can't tell you yet because you just wouldn't understand. See, something happens with your spouse. Your spouse betrays you, but confesses and repents. But you can be closer than ever before, but you're too busy being in the background of that, going back to it and crying about it and saying, if you're going to heal from it, it's time to heal and move on. Or being alone. As I talk to people and they go, Mike, I'm so tired of being alone. Why hasn't God provided a spouse for me? And see, there's several reasons for that. Maybe you should shower. Like I told somebody that, like bathe. I mean, people don't want to be around you because or what about maybe you're trying to find somebody who's actually like-minded like you. You're like it's very rare that you meet somebody who's following Jesus at a club, right? It's very rare that you meet somebody who's following Jesus at a bar. It's very rare that you meet somebody who's following Jesus at a place that sin is being committed. It's very rare. Not to say it doesn't happen. I just want you to know it does happen. There's testimonies to that. Like my testimony shares that. We might not have been following God at the time, but we both had a relationship with God. And see, but there's something that's along with that, and you just have to look and you have to be able to go. God is trying to do something better. He's trying to do something more. He's trying to do, and we're too busy crying about that to listen to what God is trying to tell us. He's going, I'm trying to get you to the next thing. And see, we know what we want is what the problem is. And we think that God doesn't know what we want. And we think that, and we're too afraid to listen to what God says, that he knows what's best for us, because we think that involves us having nothing. We think that involves us going to places that we don't want to go, doing things that we don't want to do, and giving up the lifestyles that we've established for ourselves now. That's what we think. That's what the bottom line is. We don't want to listen to what God is telling us to do. Melissa told us, as she was singing Oceans today, God has called us out onto the waters, right? And most of us, as we walk out onto the waters, we're afraid of sinking. Just like Peter was when he walked onto the water, right? He was like, God, I don't understand what you're telling me, but I'm going to do it. And as he got closer, he started taking his eyes off of Jesus, and he started to sink at that point. See, the problem is we don't even have our eyes on Jesus, and he's calling us out. He'd say, hey, I want you to come do this with me, but we're not even focused on him. We're not even looking at him. We're not even dealing with that. And so what's happening is that as soon as we step out of the water, we're sinking because we've never even had our gaze upon Jesus. We've never even been looking at him or dealing with it. We're like, no. I hear him calling me out of the water and I'm going to sink. Well, that's because you haven't actually, when was the last time you actually blew the dust off of the Bible, opened it up and read it? I wonder what he has to say to me. When was the last time you spent just time in prayer with him? When was the last time that you just spent, and it's more than just a checkbox. I'm checking this off. I did my devotions. Pastor Mike says I'm supposed to do devotions from 7 to 7:05. I did that. Supposed to spend time in prayer from 7:05 to 7:10. Did that. No, extended periods. Times fasting. Times going, God, speak to me. Not with some sort of agenda behind it, to just step out and recognize that he's not in the chaos. He's not in it tells us he's not in the wind. He's not in the fire. He's not in all of those things. He's not in the earthquakes that are happening. And don't just go back to this earth, wind, and fire song, right? He's not there. He's in the still. He's in the quiet. And too often we've busied our minds to where we're not listening. We're not listening to it, and so when he's going, I have trying to do something amazing. I'm going to do something that'll amaze you, but you're not listening to me to hear this. You're not listening to me. Whew. See, God will often speak to you, and his silence doesn't mean absence, by the way. So when he's not speaking to you, it doesn't mean that he's absent. When he doesn't speak, you may not like what he has to say at that moment. I'll just tell you right now, there's times, like just when we look back at this, when God did speak to Habakkuk, he didn't like the answer that he got. I'm going to do something amazing, but first, the Babylonians are coming. They're coming. And you should know, you don't want to hear that. Paul goes, hey, can you get this thorn out of my side? Well, after you get left beaten, left for dead, shipwrecked, and snake bitten, then we'll take care of that thorn. But see, those are the things. Paul, he's been told, after all of these things happen, Paul's told, my grace is sufficient for you. I want that thorn out. No, my grace is sufficient for you. No, I really want this pain in my side taken out. No, my grace is still sufficient for you. And see, we don't want grace. And I don't know if you, there's oftentimes I don't want grace. What I want is I want the power of God, not the grace of God. That's what I want. I want the power. I want to, hey, I want to be able to do these things. I want to be able to. So, listen. Listen for what God's doing. Listen for what he's trying to tell you to do. The second thing, which we often will be listening to God. So let me just step back here. Maybe in a hypothetical world, we're listening to God. Like it's hypothetical. So just say, yeah, I'm listening to God. Because once you accomplish that, the next thing you need to do is you need to write it down. So we're too busy too often as we get a revelation from God. God tells you to do something. God gives you instruction to do something. God goes, hey, this is what I want you to do. This is how I want you to move forward. And you do not write it down. And if you're like me, if that happens, you forgot about it 10 seconds after God revealed it to you. Like I literally have to have an app on my phone that it's called Boomerang. And so what I do is that any time that God speaks to me, any time that God gives me an idea, or I need to remember anything, I leave myself a voice note, I can take a picture of something, I can do a little note that I'm gonna type out, and then it sends me an email that I can go back and I can review later. I have to have it because I am forgetful. After service, you're gonna try and talk to me. As soon as you walk away, somebody else is gonna talk to me. As soon as you walk away, it's somebody else. And so if you're the first conversation, I forgot it. Just to give you a pure, truthful answer, if you're the first conversation after service, it should be high and by because I'll barely remember that. And so when it gets to the end of this, I have to take a note. Like when you walk away, if you don't see me break my phone out and take a note, Mike forgot. Just telling you. You should just know that. So write it down. Here's what it says, and the Lord replied, write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets. So they had tablets back then, not paper. So they had to go chisel it out. They had to go, all right, you're going to remember this bad boy, and they had to go chisel it out. For you, it's pretty simple. Send yourself a note. Send yourself an email. Send yourself a text. Do whatever you need to do to write it down because you will forget. You will forget how God has been faithful. Just think about this. I just want you to think about, just close your eyes for a moment. If you're watching at home or you're driving, don't close your eyes. But if you're here, close your eyes. And here's what I want you to do. I just want you to think of all the amazing things that God has done for you. How has he delivered you through things? How has he provided for you? How has he gotten you through situations? How has he saved you from addiction? How has he provided for you? Start thinking about that. Here's the problem. Now you can open your eyes up. Here's the problem. You don't think about that on a regular basis until somebody says, stop what you're doing and listen. Now, write it down. You're not thinking about those things. As you're walking down the street, as you got your mind going, you're not thinking about how God provided and how God saved you and how God gave you a new life and provided a new thing for you. You're not thinking about it. You're like, I got to get to this next thing that I got going on. You need reminders. You need reminders. How many of you guys have you ever heard that you see in the Bible, they would go off and they would build what we will call a monument or a testimony. They would put something back and they would start going, hey, let's go back and let's go put out stones. Let's go put something so that we could remember what God did here. We want to be able to remember this. Anybody else, do we do something like that? We do something that's like that. We take photos. Anybody remember? You went on a vacation. What did you do? You took photos. Why? You want to be able to remember it. Why? Because you probably won't in 6 months. You'll be doing, hey, we went to Hawaii 6 months ago. Well, what did we do while we were there? Well, we saw the ocean, stayed in an expensive hotel, drove around in an expensive car. We climbed Diamond Head. What else did we do? Well, when you got to the top of Diamond Head, you took a picture so that you could remember the view because guess what? You're going to forget it. You have to write it down. What did God reveal to you? Write it down so that you can remember it. So that you can look back upon it, so you can go, God, this is what you've done. Take a photo, do something with it. Document it, record it, write it down. See, Satan wants to take away what God has given to you. And the easiest way to do that is make you busy so you forget it. That's what he's trying to do. See, God will speak to you at church. Here's what will happen. After you leave here, you're going to go to the grocery store. A kid's going to come up to you. My sister keeps touching me. My brother keeps touching me. This happens. And all of a sudden, guess what happened? You forgot church. You're too busy yelling at your kids. Stop touching your brother. Stop doing this. Stop doing that. Well, what did Mike say at church today? I'm not really sure. Too busy dealing with these. You have to anchor it. You have to record it. You have to write it down. You have to build a monument towards it. Something to go back to it. See, before the prison happens, before they escape from the prisons, there's things that they're talking about. They're writing things down. They're spending time with it. They're like, just think about this stuff. Before the miracle happens, oftentimes you're listening to God, you write down what he reveals to you, then the miracles start to happen. If you haven't been doing these things, then guess what's happening? You're forgetting how God is actually going to provide and how God is going to start working in that direction of your miracle. Number 3. So listen, write it down, and wait for it. You have to wait for it. See, this is often the difficult, the painful, and the worst thing that we have to do while waiting on God. It's the wait. The wait itself is the hardest part. Why? Why is the wait the hardest part? Because we're going, God, are you actually doing something? Are you moving in this direction? God, are you delivering this? Are you doing something with us? Will my child ever come back to Christ? Will he ever have a relationship or she have a relationship? Like what sort of job will I have with benefits? What is it? And so the waiting for it becomes difficult. Will my spouse ever admit that he or she needs help? Will God help restore our marriage? And just waiting for that. I remember I told you guys last week when my daughter was in the military, she's down there and they're going, hey, you're in renal failure. You're losing both of your kidneys. God, are you going to heal my daughter? The waiting process for that, the wait. Are you going to do this, God? Because I'm going to self-sacrifice in order for this. Here's what it says as we continue. In Habakkuk 2:3, it says, for the revelation awaits an appointed time. Not your time. That's the important part of this. It's not on your timeline. So if you're thinking it's on your timeline, the answer is no. It's an appointed timeline. And it says it speaks of the end and will not prove false, though it linger. And see, here's the problem. We wait upon it as if it's a bad fart, and that lingers. We want to escape. We want to run. I'm not waiting. It's lingering. I'm not waiting for God. And see, sometimes we have to wait through difficult things in order for God to deliver through it. In order for God to end up happening to this. Though it linger, wait for it. Wait for what God is going to do. Wait through the bad. Wait for what's getting ready to come up. It will certainly come, if not today. It will certainly come. And it will not delay. And see, that's what God is saying to him. See, here's the thing. Waiting on a spouse. You have to wait through difficult things. Dating, waiting, deep desire. Single is a whole number, though. I want you to know that. You take a moment to think about that. See, here's the thing. We know that if you go out, I'll give you guys an example that I used to use a lot in the past. Anybody ever open up a can of Campbell's beef stew? Right? You bought something like that. You bought a can of soup, it's okay, right? It gets the job done. Fills your belly up. You get through it. But would you prefer that? Or would you prefer somebody who took some time and cut up the potatoes and cut up the meat and put it in a crock pot and let it sit for hours, right? You want something that's home cooked. You want something that takes some time. Often the best meals take longer, right? Nobody wants, and see, here's the thing. A lot of our faith in this room is microwave faith. We want to have it now. That's microwave faith. We're not waiting for the slow cooker to get finished, right? We're just like, no, I want it and I want it now. And it's a problem that our whole culture has today, this immediate gratification process that all of us are after, this whole thing that we're just like, I need it and I need it now. And we have to get away from this because we have to recognize God doesn't sell microwaves. God doesn't provide microwaves. God has that 8-hour slow cooker. It doesn't even have a high setting anymore. It's just on low. That's what it is. And so you have to get better at waiting for what God is getting ready to do. God is going to make you wait. And for you, that's the difficult part. We've already established that you couldn't wait for a photo to download now. You couldn't wait for it's a buffer for you to be able to watch the show that you want. How much more difficult will it be for God to deliver something upon you that is going to be amazing? But these things I plan won't happen right away. Slowly, steadily, surely the time approaches when the vision will be fulfilled. If it seems slow, do not despair. For these things will surely come to pass. Just be patient. They will not be overdue a single day. So the problem is you are trying to set the day for God. And God has already appointed a different time. God's going, I will deliver at my appointed time, not at your appointed time. It'll come when I say is. See, God's timing is perfect. God's timing is perfect. You know, and I'll just tell you is that just start thinking about these significant things that have ever happened in your life, and you just go, look at what God did. God's timing was perfect in it. If he delivered you from addiction, I promise you God's timing was immaculate when it came out of that addiction because you were ready for it at that point. If God delivered you a spouse, you were ready for it at that point. If God delivered you, when you start to think about this, God's timing is amazing. And he knows when you're ready for what he's promised to deliver. So here's the thing. Melissa and I planted the church in 2011. And so everybody we talk to, God goes, yes, God says you should do it. Everybody we talk to, yeah, you should plant a church, Mike. You should plant a church. I see that. It'd be great. So we planted a church. And all of a sudden, that first Sunday comes along. There's nobody there. There's 12 people. There's 12 people. And we sit there, and for me, I look at it, and I've never pastored a church, so I didn't know that was a good number, it was a bad number, but I certainly felt defeated. I had told them, put out 175 chairs. I had told them, hey, there's going to be some more, and better have some more chairs in the back, because we're going to fill those 175 and add some more. And yet, only 12 people showed up. But here's the thing. I still had a full-time job. Melissa was still working full-time. Melissa was pregnant at the time, somewhere around there. But as you start looking at this, as we go through it, all of a sudden, we weren't ready to be able to pastor more than 12. That's what it really came down to, is God goes, I can give you this amount of people because if I give you more, you're going to fail. You're going to struggle. You're not going to be able to make it. And so as we were starting to transition, God goes, because we kept going, God, we pray for growth. God, we're praying for you to do something here. And God, and there would be so many times that we would get in the car at the end. We got into a box truck, very similar to what we had now. We get into it, and I'd sit there, and I'd look at Melissa, tears in my eyes, and I go, I don't even know if this is what we're supposed to be doing. I don't know if this is what God has called us to do. I don't know if this is what's supposed to be. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why God isn't doing this. I don't know why God isn't doing this, because I wasn't ready for him to do anything else. I wasn't ready for it. And see, it took me a long, long time. I used to blame what other people were saying about me, what other things were happening, what was going on in this situation or that situation, but the reality was I wasn't ready. And there's oftentimes I'm not ready now. There's often situations that come up and I just go, I don't know. And so now I look and I go, well, God, you're doing something, because we're starting to see a change. We're starting to see God doing something. And I know that I'm going, God, I don't know what's happening, but this must be that appointed time that you have talked about, where we're going to start seeing what happens in Acts 2 when people start coming and they start seeing, and they just go, I want more of that. And see, here's what and I just want you to know, if it's not God's time, you can't force it. If it's not God's time, you can't force it. You cannot force something to happen outside of God's time. And when it is God's time, you can't stop it. When it's God's time, you can't stop it. So if God's saying this is going to happen, it's in his time. It's going to happen. There's nothing you can do to stop it. You might be going, well, this is taking forever. It's never going to come to pass. I'm not seeing anything going on. Though it linger. Though it linger. You just have to wait for it. Continue to pray for it. Continue to be in prayer. Wait for it. God's delays are not God's denials. They're not. God isn't telling you no. You'll know a no. In Habakkuk 2:4, it says, see the enemy, Babylon is puffed up. His desires are not upright, but the righteous person will live by God's faithfulness. The righteous will live by faith. See, here's the thing. God is asking you to do something. God's asking you to go in a direction. God's asking you to live a certain way. God's asking you to do. The problem is you're probably not living by faith. You're probably not living by faith. And I want you to know is that it's difficult to live by faith. It is. It's difficult to live by faith. It's hard. It's not an easy thing to just go, well, I just got to put it in God's hands, and I'll do what he's asked me to do, but I'll live in the faith that he's doing something in the background that I don't know about, that I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's going on. I'll give you a couple years ago, I was still working retail. I was in retail management at the time, and I was driving on my way to work, and I got a call from work, and they were like, hey, we need you to come in and do this. And I said, I don't think I'm coming in. They're like, no, you're supposed to be here at whatever time it was. I said, no, I think you missed the point. I don't think I'm coming anymore. I think I'm done. And I turned the car around and I went home. And I got home, and Melissa was still at home. She hadn't taken off for her day yet. And she's like, what are you doing here? I said, I think I just quit my job. And she was like, oh, okay. Well, what are you going to do? I go, I think I'm going to do what God has asked me to do. Right? We had gotten this recommendation. We were talking to a pastor friend of ours, and he said, until you fully commit to God, he will always be half in and half out with you as well. And I was too busy worried about, I was like, what are we going to do without my paycheck? What are we going to do with this? How are we going to pay for daycare? How are we going to pay for food? How are we going to pay for all this stuff? And I was like, yeah. And so on my way there, I was just spending time with God, and I was just like, I guess I'm going home. And I went home, and Melissa didn't like it because she got busier than ever, right? All of a sudden her work just expanded exponentially. Like it was crazy. But my focus became church. It was just, hey, we're going to chase after what God has called us to do. We're going to chase after that direction. I was living by faith because I had no idea how we were going to pay the bills. I had no idea how we were going to do anything. And we were just like, because I was making decent money, and Melissa had just started doing hair again. And so we was like, all right, well, let's just see how it goes. And ever since that day, now, there's times where I've gone in and be like, oh, I could use some extra money, but it hasn't been out of the desperate need of money. It's just been like, hey, there's some things that we'd like to do, or there's things that we'd like to go, or places that we'd like to go, or parts of the world, or things that we'd like to do. But it's never been like going, God hasn't provided for us. It's never been that way. And so by stepping out and going, this is what God is going to do. And in fact, we have more stuff now than what we've ever had, and a much more comfortable lifestyle, because we get to do the things that God has said, hey, I want you to go do these things. And I don't have to call and go, I need time off from work to go do it. You guys have given me that. You guys have allowed me to do this. You allowed me to be able to, when somebody called me and goes, hey, can you come teach at this conference in October? I was like, yep, I can be there. I didn't have to call my boss and go, can I get a couple days off to go teach this? I did. I talked to my boss. I said, let me spend some time in prayer. Got it affirmed. Yes, I'll be there. See, I've been able to step out and do those things, and see, I can live by that. And see, but see, my faith, and I'll just tell you, is that by living by faith, my faith does not just is not just to get the result that I want. That's not what it is. See, that's my character. My character is how I get the results, and the character and the goodness of God, because God continues to provide. It's just amazing how God provides. It's just really amazing. So what I'll tell you, there's a lot of times where you're going to be waiting. There's a lot of times you're going to be waiting, going, God, what are you doing right now? How are you doing this? And I want you to know is that you have to have this thing, and you have to have this firm belief going, my God can get me through this, my God will get me through this, and even if he doesn't, I'll still believe. That's the mindset that we have to have. That's where we have to go, and that's the thing. What I want you to know is I have this deep calling that I need to come down to the floor for a second here. So let me come down here. I don't know why. I'm sure it's going to cost. See, too often there's like this huge separation, and we've talked about putting in a stage lower to make it to where there's less of a separation, because I do feel like I'm deeply divided, just a little distance. But what I want you to know is that I firmly believe that God is trying to do something in each one of your lives right now. I firmly believe it. As I listen to your stories, as I listen to what God is trying to do, and God, as I listen to what's happening in your lives, and I know that some of us we're on what we call the tail end of our life, right? We'd be like, hey, Mike, I don't know what God's going to do. Mine's almost over. I want you to know something is that God is going to do something in your life as well. I just want you to know that, and I firmly believe that you're here because of that purpose. I firmly believe that God brought you to this service, to this church, because there is something for you. And I don't know what it is, and I don't know if that means you're going to serve here, or I don't know what that means at all, but I firmly believe that God is trying to do something with each one of you because he wouldn't have brought you here otherwise. He wouldn't have. It could be lead a small group. It could be something as trivial as helping with set up and tear down. It could be something that's even much more than that. Because I'll tell you right now, when people started with helping with set up and tear down, their best friends, their relationships are in that group. They showed up here, had no idea what was getting ready to happen, and all of a sudden, the people that they connect with on a regular basis are that group that is that set up and tear down. You see, the thing is that so many of us right now, we are lonely, we are hurting, we are discouraged, we're afraid of what's to come, and we're navigating this life all alone. All alone. And we're trying to bury ourselves into things that are distractions away from the calling that God has placed upon our lives. We'll use TV, we'll use video games, we'll use internet, we'll use our phones. We will literally do any distraction that will take us away from the internalizing of what God's trying to do in our life. And all it does is actually drive us deeper and deeper into depression and further away from God. That's all it's doing at that point. And what I want you to do, and this is going to be the most challenging thing as you are waiting on God right now, because a lot of us are in here, we're waiting on God to do something. It could be as simple as just go, this is the direction I want you to go, or this is how I want you to do things, or this is what I want to happen. A lot of us were waiting. And so as you are waiting, eliminate the distractions. And I'm not saying you have to get rid of them completely. I'm not saying, well, Mike said to get rid of my phone. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is do not allow that to be what occupies your life. There's too many, just look at it. Go turn on your phone, turn on Netflix, look at your screen time, look at how much time you're spending on video games, look at how much time you're spending on watching movies or whatever it is. And see, all of those things are just distractions that are taking you away from what God's true purpose is for your life. God has given you a purpose. And I don't know what it is, and we can talk about it, and we can spend some time in that, but I'll tell you right now, it is definitely not to play video games, it's definitely not in movies, it's definitely not going and wasting it on our phones. And I promise you, there's so many of us now that are wasting away hours and hours of your life on your telephone. Hours and hours of your life on telephone. I can just tell you now. And the only people that you are helping with that is Verizon and T-Mobile, and just those shareholders, because they are getting paid off of your addiction. They're getting paid off your addiction. And it's just one of those things. And I'll just tell you now, if I was to come to you and to go, hey, the greatest purpose in your life is going to spend 28 hours a week in front of a TV. Would you tell me that's a great purpose of your life? By the way, it's the average of what people are spending in front of their TVs right now. 28 hours a week. That's a full-time job in front of your TV. And if you happen to be retired, or if you happen to not be working, or if you happen to be on Social Security, and if you happen to be on any of those other things, then you're spending probably closer to 70 hours a week in front of your TV. 70 hours a week. Could you imagine what God would do with that time? Could you imagine if you were just go, God, use me during this time? God, use me for this time? Could you imagine what you could do for God's kingdom in 70 hours a week? Or in 40 hours a week, or in 30 hours a week, or even if we start small, could you imagine what God would do in this kingdom for 5 hours a week? Could you imagine if you just devoted an hour? Just an hour. What God would do? How could you help change somebody's life? How could you help navigate somebody through something? How could God work in your life? I want you to know that right now you are destined for a much greater purpose. You just have to eliminate the distraction. And while you're waiting, wait with a purpose. Spend time with God. Spend time in the direction going, God, what will you have for me? Which direction will you have me go? What will you have me do? Start listening for his voice. And I'll just tell you now, it's very clear. Scripture tells us it will not be in all the chaos that you will find or hear his voice. It will be in the still. So be still. Be still and listen for God's voice. And God's voice, and as you start to hear it, then you can go, now I know what I'm waiting upon. Now I know. And even though I might be facing this Babylonian culture that's coming, or the things that are happening, but I'll tell you right now, there's actually a period where the Israelites thrive in Babylon. And we can thrive in Babylon. We can thrive while things are happening. We can thrive in the chaos that's happening in our world today. But we need to be focused on what God has in store for us rather than what everybody else is trying to go, you need to be doing this, you need to be listening to this, you need to be going in this direction. You don't. At all. Just cast away that stuff. And I know. Some of you are going right now, you're like, Mike, you need to wrap this up. There's a football game on right now. Mike, the almighty NFL, how am I going to miss that? That's 3 hours and 3 hours and 3 hours tomorrow and 3 hours on, Mike, I don't know how I'm going to give up that 12 hours. You know how you give it up? You turn it off. That's how you give it up. Up, off. I got other things to do. I got things to do with my kids. I got things to do with my spouse. I got things to do with God. I got other things that are much more important than that. It's much more important than the almighty NFL. That's much more important than, I've got friends that mean more than that. I got friends that mean more than what I'll ever get from any of those things. I got friends that mean more, and I got family that means more, and I will tell you that part of that purpose that you're looking at is the community that you're sitting in right now. When you're going, what is my purpose? Why do I have you get up and start shaking one another's hands? Because you need to start making some friends with the people that are going to help you get to where God wants you to be. That's what you need. It has to start happening. Because I'll just tell you now, whatever you're going through, I promise you somebody else in this room has gone through it or is going through it along with you. You just don't know. Because we just aren't willing to share. And we'd rather go sulk in our TVs and complain about what God's not doing as we watch whatever's out there and struggle to pay our bills and all those things. I'll just tell you, start sharing. Start being part of the community. And as you're waiting, start thriving in the wait. Start thriving with friendship. Start thriving with love. Start thriving with people that are going, I want the best for you. I want more. And I just tell you right now, God wants more for you than what you, and he's getting ready to do something amazing. That's what he says. I am going to do something amazing. You will not even believe it. Start believing that God's going to do something amazing in your life. And when you believe that, you'll stop wasting it away on everything else that you've just been allowing to fill in those times. Let's pray. Father, thank you. Thank you for today. Thank you for just this awakening and just this slowdown, and just for us to be able to go, God, we believe, we know that you're going to do something amazing, that you're getting ready to do something amazing with each one of us, that you have this amazing plan, and that we can thrive even under the persecution of the Babylonians, even under the persecution of anything that we are facing right now, whether it's just our struggles or it's unemployment or whatever is that we're just going, I don't know how to put another zero in the bank account. I don't know how to do any of this, but we can thrive in these things because we can have you. And if you are with us, who can be against us? And so if we start spending more time in faith and more time in your word and more time in prayer with you, and we start to listen for your direction as we cast away the things that have been distractions, whether it's been TV or it's whatever it is that's just distracting us from what you have in store for our lives, help us cast that away and help us move in this new direction with you. We don't have to get rid of it completely, God, but help us cast away where it's become toxic, where it's become negative, where it involves more of us doing that than spending time with you or spending time with other people that will help us progress in our faith, that will help us grow closer to you, help us grow closer to one another. Father, I know that you are trying to do something amazing in each one of our lives, but we've allowed the distractions to prohibit us from actually moving in that direction. Whatever that distraction is, whatever that comfort is for us, help us just cast that away. Whether we say, I'm just bored and I fill that time in, but that boredom is that idle hands that become the devil's playground. Help us to cast that away. Help us to start finding purpose in our lives to where the boredom is gone because we now have a purpose that we're moving towards, a direction that we're going. Father, help us to write down the revelations that you make in our life. We don't have to chisel it into a tablet. We don't have to, now we can just take the simple measure of sending ourselves a text or sending ourselves a note, but help us to write it down so that we can remember all that you have revealed in our lives. There's been so many times that you've spoken to us that we've just forgotten what you've said because we've already moved on to the next task. So Father, help us to slow down. Help us to As we, in this waiting and in this wandering, help us to slow down and write down the revelations that you've made to us. Father, thank you. Thank you for all that you're doing, and thank you for the direction that you're taking us. Thank you for this message that you have clearly wanted to be more intimate than what I was doing at the beginning of it. So, Father, thank you. And it's in your Son, Jesus' name, that we pray, and we ask for all of this. We all said, amen. Amen. Well, guys, I want to say...